be interesting to talk about that and how that came to be and what anything you found useful about that. And yeah, maybe it's time to have. I mean, I guess it's just you and me, but we can have a little bit of chat about the group, maybe from a just from a just from a progress and perspective, maybe even like a business perspective, ideas and stuff like that could be interesting. I can also
Yep.
share, you know, I have some interesting things to share about, traveling to these conventions and recording content, while traveling.
Yeah.
I
That's
think I
interesting.
shared a little bit about it previously,
Right.
but I think there's more interesting stuff to communicate, especially after this most recent experience. So yeah, I think that sounds like a pretty good agenda.
Yeah.
So
I was looking for a quote from because I had listened to a couple of your episodes, and there's a quote I had written down from was it a gentleman you guys had on, Louis, I think is his last name or first name.
the NFT, so the NFT
Yeah,
podcast,
the NFT podcast, and I had written down a
Louis.
great quote. I don't think that's I'm pronouncing it right. It was one of the ones
Oh,
that you recommended.
was it from the convention? And there was like
No,
a
no, this is an older episode because I had asked you which episodes of The Edge of NFT would you recommend for someone who's new to the topic.
right.
And Anyway, I had written down a great quote, but I don't know where the hell I put it.
Okay,
He was a
cool.
fascinating guy. He started several businesses, and then he was in the gaming. You know what I'm talking about?
Let's see. In terms of gaming, I mean, Rish Latlakar, he was one of our earlier
Yeah,
guests.
no, no,
He
it
had
wasn't him. Asian uh,
okay.
gentleman.
So we did have there was I forget whether he was in gaming or not, but there was a quick interview with somebody named Louis or Lewis from um what was it called? It's a service that helps, like artists create NFTs. And we had Residio on the podcast, and they worked with, I can't remember the name of it for some reason. There's so much in my head. But he just had a quick interview while we were at like an event basically, and he talked about just how people were they didn't he didn't understand how people didn't understand DeFi, which is decentralized finance, but they did understand NFTs because he was
Interesting.
like, oh, I talk to people about NFTs and they go, I get it. And then I talk to them about decentralized finance and they're like, I don't
That
know what you're
interesting.
talking about. And he's like, oh,
That's
they're kind of the
interesting.
same thing. um, so I don't know if that's who you were listening to,
No, no,
but
that doesn't ring a sense. No, and that's just to go back to that, and that's because NFTs is one of the technologies that can be applied to decentralized finance.
mhm.
Would that be fair?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, in short, an NFT, one way to describe it is a smart contract.
Hmm.
And so, in
That
finance,
lives on the cloud in a way that it it survives anybody trying to eliminate it, or it
immutable,
be destroyed. Immutable is the word. Exactly.
immutable.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just a cloud, but it's a distributed
Distributed. Yeah.
cloud.
Of course.
You've
Yeah.
got the data on your computer, somebody all over the world, everybody's has a little bit on their computer. And so, if you just take one node out of the system, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Everything still works fine.
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
I come back to this. I've shared it as an example, but when it resonated for me the most as to one of the ways this technology can be applied is in countries that don't have a court of record or a repository of any kind, physical or
Hmm.
otherwise, as to who owns what or who was born where or where,
Hmm.
all of that information that we take for granted that I can go here in the States and in other countries to go get a copy of my birth certificate, for example, to
Right.
prove whatever I might have to prove. Oh, and developing countries, that doesn't exist in a reliable fashion, and this is a way that
Yeah.
can begin to address that.
Yeah, yeah, totally. We just had a conversation. I think it was part of this convention. We were hosting some of the panels and doing online versions of the panels. And this exact thing came up where it
Mm,
was like, um, all of a sudden, so when you think back to like cell phone technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, people in developing countries had access to information. If you
Right. So it's a
combine
leveling
like
of the playing field in that regard, right?
exactly, and then now, a lot of things that are standing in the way in developing countries is like, we have an advantage in developed countries if we've built an infrastructure that supports, record keeping and systematizing of things.
Yeah, chain of ownership, for example. Like when I buy a piece of property
Exactly.
and we do a title search, it's depending on those records being there. But in some of these countries, that doesn't exist. I don't.
Exactly.
You
What's interesting about the blockchain is then it can almost immediately exist
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have to build the infrastructure,
Right.
then even, the enforcement is sort of an issue, but at
Sure, that's still
least,
an issue as to who's going to take this fact and enforce it that this is my piece of land, let's say, or this
right,
is my property.
right. Yeah, but we talked to a guy from he's kind of like, he's got like his retirement business basically and volunteer work. And he moved to Nicaragua and he's got an avocado farm and he's creating
Interesting.
NFTs where you can own, basically 1/10,000th share of his avocado farm. And he's got all different ways that you can benefit from that, but also like the local people can benefit from, what the activities that he's facilitating through the blockchain. So literally, there's artists that created the artwork that go along with the NFTs.
Hmm.
All they need is a cryptocurrency wallet. Every time there's like a transaction or a trade or a purchase or minting of one of these NFTs, they just get a little bit of cash in their wallet.
Right. Right.
No, nobody has to do anything to make it happen because it's
Right.
programmed.
Right. And they don't, and then again, going back to the distributed financing, I'm assuming it's part of it. I don't have to then worry about, do I have a bank account? Do I need to convert that to a local currency? I can use that value to buy something else, perhaps.
hmm
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. So
And El
that's one
Salvador,
of the
he
benefits.
he was heavily involved in El Salvador,
Mm.
which I believe the way that the government has implemented, Bitcoin is you have to accept it as currency, kind of
Oh,
thing.
interesting. That's legal
I mean, it's
currency.
not like I don't know that they're saying it's the currency of the country, but basically it's
Right. But it's legally
just
acceptable.
I think it's not only is it legally acceptable, but it's almost like enforced. If you
Required.
say,
I
"Hey,
see.
we
I
don't
see.
take Bitcoin," you go, "No, you
You
got to take
must accept. Oh,
Bitcoin." That's
that's interesting. Because is that even the case in the United States? Is that true? I don't think so, right? I can say
I
there's no law
no.
that says I have to accept Bitcoin in the United States. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Right.
But there's probably a law that says you have to accept U.S.
You
dollars.
have to. Well, that is, I believe that is the law that I have to accept
Yeah,
US dollars. Now, I
yeah.
guess I can get away with it by saying I don't accept cash, but in any other form, in a credit card or a debit card, it's still based on a US dollar price that I'm paying you for that good or service, right?
Right. Which
Yeah.
is interesting too, because I know I've been to other countries where they want you to pay in dollars.
They do. Yeah.
I would like you to pay in dollars,
Well,
please.
because of the stability of that currency by comparison.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So, anyways, yeah. If you remember,
Yeah,
I'm not.
I'll look it up. I wrote it down and he just had a really good quote that now I knew if I didn't write it down, I would forget it. But now amongst my mess,
And
I
you
don't have it.
forgot
But
where you
anyway,
write it down.
but he was fascinating and just a really brilliant guy. I'm scanning through your list now because now it bugs me that I can't freaking remember his name. But anyway, it'll come to me. We can move on to
Yeah,
something else.
I'll look it up too. I'll see
No
if I can
worries.
figure it out. But
Yep.
anyways, yeah. Let me go into a little bit. Having gone to a second event. Do you go to conferences, conventions? Is that something you get into, or
Well,
I haven't?
depending on the
Yeah.
industry that I'm in. For example, most recently, when I was in the car wash business, they have a very active. In fact, it's going on this week. And my former business partner David Begin is there because he's still consulting into that industry. So
hmm
they have a huge annual conference in Vegas. I was just in Vegas last weekend, but for a wedding. And so I used to go to that one when I was in the business, and then um, when I was in the salon business, there's a big hair conference. so I have attended that one. And then for podcasting, I think we've talked about it maybe on this mastermind before. I've been to one event, the Podfest that was in Orlando a few years ago. So
Right.
and then obviously back in my prior life in the software industry, that was a popular thing to do the annual user conference event.
hmm
So there I participated from the vendor side. So over the years, that's been my experience with conferences.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, a couple things that I think are interesting that I think are worth sharing is, well, number one, we've done these things where we kind of I would call it not like co-host, but maybe you get listed as a sponsor on a conference, right? And I say we, but like Josh from the team is the one that's focused on it. He'll like say, "Oh, hey, you guys, you're putting together a convention. You're going to need some great guests. I know some great people. Let's put together a couple panels for you."
Mm.
And then that becomes like a way of saying, just list us as a partner on your convention. But not only that, to negotiate and say, do you mind if we release this content also as a
Oh,
special bonus podcast episode, right?
right, right.
So it's pretty cool. We basically have too much material now.
Wow.
So whereas,
Meaning
I,
that you're either going to get the recording or you record it at these events.
yeah, they record. Well, that's also nice. And they take
Yeah,
care of the recording. They
right.
take care of, some of the, depending on the situation, sometimes you take care of getting everybody together at the same time. Maybe they do, but definitely they're now the recording qualities are typically, just one track. It is nice
Hmm.
to have individualized tracks,
Right. Yeah,
but it's fine.
it
And
is. Yeah.
usually what we do is we don't even edit those. We just throw a
Wow.
bumper on the front and the back and say, hey, here's a bonus episode. This is
Hmm.
our interview from this convention. Check it out. We hope you like it. Give a quick intro. And then at the end, say, hey, I hope you like that. We had a lot of fun. And then just say,
And
typical outro.
that'll be an episode of the Edge of NFT.
Yes, I like to
Okay.
call them bonus episodes.
Bonus episodes. Okay.
Just,
Okay.
I
Because
think
that's how you're
bonus.
delineating them from an audience perspective as to kind of what I'm going to get here. This is not the typical you and the other guys doing an interview. This is bonus content.
Yeah, and some of it sounds like our typical interviews, and some of it is a little bit different. Maybe it's a shorter length. We have three parts of our show. We do the regular interview, we do the edge quick hitters, and we do the hot topics. Maybe we only did the regular interview, or maybe it's a panel
Mm-hmm.
discussion that we just hosted. Um, but I find, you know, there's a difference, of course, between what you're doing and what we're doing. Our stuff is kind of very like, oh, what's the latest thing?
Yeah,
And so
more. I
by
would call it more topical in that regard. You
Right.
know.
So, but by coming in and say, hey, we went to this event, we went to this convention. Maybe you didn't get to go, but now you
Mm-hmm.
get to see what happened, right? That's cool.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you could do that in any space. That's one of there's an opportunity cost for people to go to a convention, whether it's online or in person.
Yeah.
And if you can just say, hey, you're my audience. You wouldn't even want to go to this whole convention. You probably would, there'd be too many things to pick from. Maybe it's not worth spending the whole ticket price because there's all these other things that
Sure.
you probably didn't care about. But here's a couple snippets that, you can get in on that, you missed. And so I think what's cool about it too is people can still feel like an insider without attending
You're
these
giving them
events.
access. Yeah, you're giving them access to it without them having to
Hmm.
invest the money and the time to go themselves.
Yeah. So I think that could be done in lots
So
of
do
different
you when
spaces.
that kind of content, do you either then come back or in that bumper, do you provide any opinions or interpretations of what somebody presented or what was discussed, or do you just let it be and because that would take a lot of time to do that. So I'm
Yeah.
just curious as to what you do there.
Typically, it's pretty hands off. So,
Mm-hmm.
so far, there's been two episode styles that we've done where it's kind of maybe bonus content or a different type of episode.
Mm-hmm.
One is where we just host a panel, and it's usually just me because I'm the editor kind of person. So I'll just do a quick intro and outro. Don't really give much analysis unless I have, some little thing to say, but it's kind of like minimize the amount of production time. The other thing which we've done, which has a little bit of a bottleneck because of this, is we'll go to an event, and this is very new, something very new that we're trying. We'll take one of these H1N podcast recorders, just like a little handheld thing.
Yeah, you had shown us. when you were getting ready for this, you had bought some equipment, and I think you shared that with us then.
Did I? Yeah, I think you might, because there's multiple devices. There's like
Mm-hmm.
a Pod Track P4, which has four
Mm-hmm.
inputs. I don't know if I know I showed it to Mark, although he already knew about it. There's another device called the H1N, which is just one. It already just has one little microphone on it. Has a second input if you want to put it on there,
I
and
see.
it's super light. I mean, it's
Ah,
super light.
okay.
You just the weight of a couple AA batteries basically, and then the rest is
Wow.
just
Okay,
like
that's fine.
plastic
No,
and
the one you had
circuitry.
shown that I had seen was a bulkier, similar to the one we have, which is a
Yeah.
bigger device. Yeah, with like two microphones or something like that.
Yeah,
I
I'm trying
believe
to
that's
think
the
if I
one.
let me see if I even have it. If I have it, I'll grab it
So
real
you
quick.
didn't take that one with you?
Um, we did take that one this time, but I basically realized that, yeah, I don't think I have it right here. I basically realized that, oh yeah, I do. Cool. And I even popped a little windscreen on it
Oh yeah,
too.
no, I had not seen that. Yeah, that's
But
like
yeah,
a
this
little
is
digital
tiny.
recorder size.
Yeah. And then it has like a kind of cool
That's cool.
stereo microphone on the end of it. And you just basically you put a little memory card in there,
Huh.
right? And I think this thing costs like a little bit over $100, I think.
Wow,
And it does give pretty good audio
pretty good
quality.
quality.
Now, the caveat that I have with this is my podcast co-hosts, they've got other things that they're good at, right? They're not audio experts. So, they think, yeah, oh hey, how you doing? Oh hey, hey, what's up? Hi, how are you? And then you listen back to it and it's like
Yeah.
so,
Because of the
but it's
handling it more than anything else. Yeah,
the handling of
and the
it, and I
different
and I tell the
volumes,
guy,
and
I tell the guys like, listen, just
just
take a
place
little,
it. Yeah,
take a head, no, just
right.
take headphones,
Oh,
pop
I
them in
see.
there,
So that
and
you can
put it
hear,
in
so
there
you can
so you can
monitor.
hear what it sounds like that you're getting on
Right,
audio.
right.
And they'll be like, I didn't, and I'm like, oh, okay. But if you can hear, it's actually really cool because then you can go, oh, I need to stop holding it. I
You
need
can
to stop
really monitor it.
manhandling it, or maybe I should move it a little bit further away or
Right.
closer. And if you handle it like that, we actually did a couple of interviews where they're like, we had 4 or 5 people around a table, and I would just be the one because I would be good at
Yeah,
that part
because
of
you
it.
knew how to
Just
do it.
kind of
Yeah.
like, just turn it,
Yeah.
and put it in front of the person when it's time for them to talk. And you listen back and you make sure you get the good signal.
Hmm.
Um, and gotten some pretty good interviews that way. So yeah, these are cool.
Yeah. Very cool. Now,
Yeah.
is it a dynamic type microphone? So it tends to be what's spoken in front of it versus what's behind it. It's pretty good about blocking
Actually,
out background noise.
I'm actually not sure whether it's
Okay.
dynamic or what's the other kind?
The
Compressor or something?
yeah,
Condenser. There you
condense.
go.
Yeah. Which it took me
Um,
a while to understand which is which, but the dynamic is the one that's you have to speak directly into, which is what we want. So it picks up
mhm.
less background, but it's not the type that you would put in the center of the table and pick up a group around it. You have to direct it, like you said.
I My guess, just from the way that it performs,
Mm-hmm.
is I would guess it's a little bit more of a at the dynamic, right? The
Dynamic side,
dynamics is a
yeah,
bigger room,
yeah, yeah.
but you can kind of get like a condenser effect out of it by
Oh,
focusing on
yeah,
who
yeah.
who you're putting it in front of.
That's
But
great.
it'll capture background noise.
So you used
Um,
it on this trip, obviously, to capture
yeah, I used it
several
on this trip.
conversations.
Used it on the one to New York even more. Um, Yeah, and the nice part about it is that other thing that I have has 4 inputs. I use that. The reason I got these, I didn't have these the first time I had the 4 input device,
I see.
and I actually took the 4 input device, which is kind of bulky, and I put it in a bag, and I had a microphone cable coming out of it, and a headphone cable, and it's got batteries, and that thing's not
Damn.
light. So I was walking around that, and I certainly looked maybe more professional, I guess. Like, oh, hey, here's a guy with a full gear
Right.
kit, But at the same
But
time,
that was cumbersome, I'm sure.
it was cumbersome and annoying. And these, you literally could stick it in your pocket.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not a big
Or
deal.
your bag or whatever you're carrying.
We got an interview. We actually missed an interview with Gary Vee on this.
Really? What do you mean missed?
So it was literally like the one of the first times we used it, and I gave it to this woman that's working on our team, because there was a crowd of people around Gary Vee in New York City.
Well, I
And people
imagine.
were elbowing in to get a talk with him. And number one, she's like really kind of fearless and feisty. But number two, she was like one of, probably maybe there was like 25 people around him, and she was like maybe one of one or two females, right? And
Yeah.
so, people go, okay,
Advantage.
like give her a chance, like give her a
Right,
chance to
right.
say. So I gave her the thing, and she went and she doesn't know the space that well, so you just ask what question to ask. She asked him a question, and she put it in front of him, which is all great. But there's an input volume thing here, and it was at 0. Now, luckily,
Uh,
she's sharp. She actually got a backup on her phone, which I was
oh,
very
she did. All
impressed
right.
with.
So she did capture audio of the question,
She
of
did
the answer to
capture
the
audio.
question. Ah, okay.
So, anyways, I think these
So
things
how
are
will you
pretty
use
cool.
that snippet? I'm curious of a celebrity like that. How will you integrate that into an episode? Will you
Yeah,
just
and this
talk about it
comes
and then insert it, or what are you thinking?
this comes to the second type of episode that we've been doing. That's more like a bonus or an extra or just different. And that is like go to an event and maybe just have like a 10, 15 minute conversation with people. And then create a full episode where maybe
Mm-hmm.
there's a little bit of a theme to it.
Yeah.
That one takes a little bit more production.
Yeah.
Not too much more, but it's intimidating to sit down because you go, okay, hey everyone, welcome to this special episode of Edge of NFT, where we're bringing you content live from, I should be recording this just so I don't have to say it twice, live from NFT NYC. Oh, we had a great time there. It was really cool. We came across all really cool people. And this episode, we decided we wanted to group some of the conversations that we had into some of the, the leaders in the space, or the most staggering acquaintances that we made or whatever. Okay, let's dive into it. Let's jump off with here. We actually had a chance to interview, the illustrious Gary Vee himself. It's a really quick snippet, but it gives you a sense of where his mind is at. And he was just on the heels of giving a talk, with one of the conference organizers, where he said, Edge of or the NFT NYC could be just as big as South by Southwest. Check it out. So like that in that case, I'll give a little bit more context. And then when that's over, I'll say, hey, that was cool. That was Gary Vee. Up next, here's a little snippet from XYZ person.
Yeah.
So I want to do that. Maybe I'm a little bit too maybe put a little bit too much care and attention into it because we just need to get stuff out there.
Right.
But
Right.
if as a creator, I want to curate those a little bit
Yeah.
more and
Yeah.
not just make an episode where it goes from one to the next without much context. So
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, that one
Now, of
takes a
course,
little bit
the
more.
challenge you have, back to the point you were making earlier, that some of this content has a shelf life, and so you want to get it out there sooner than later, right?
Yeah,
The
totally.
comment that Gary might have had on whatever the question was may not be as impactful a year from now as it is right now, right? Or the next
Yeah,
couple
and
of
even
months,
like a week from
or a
now.
week from now, exactly, because you're in such a fast moving environment that's part of the challenge. You got to get the stuff out there.
Yeah, but I mean, especially so basically, it's kind of an iterative thing that we're going through right now. So we still haven't perfected it, but maybe eventually we'll get a thing where we have a format for these things that we do on the road, and it actually makes it the way that we sort of intro and outro each little snippet can even make it easy for us to put them together, or even like I think especially with an event like that NFT NYC,
Yeah.
man, that could have been cool if we could just release stuff basically instantly.
Right. Right.
The good
Just
news is people tolerate lower production quality
right. Especially, exactly, especially
faster.
if you pay your
Yeah.
packaging, and that's part of what you're doing, where you're calling it something else. It's not what
Hmm.
I'm expecting or whatever standard I might hold you up to for a regular episode. This is
Right.
bonus content.
Yeah. So we really need so it's a little bit sounds a little bit unmanageable, but maybe it's actually more manageable. We need to start hiring more help to do this because I'm kind of
Administrative help
yeah, for
or
editing
production.
and
Yeah,
and
production help.
production because there's
Mhm.
certainly I'm sure people out there that can can do this stuff for me.
Sure.
It's like it's a little bit hard for me to let go of that, like,
Yeah.
wanting to do it, but I think it'll be best for
Because
our
you enjoy
business.
doing it, or why is it hard for
Yeah,
you to
I
let
like
go?
have ideas about it. Well, number one, I like doing it, but number two, I find it hard to communicate to someone.
Right. And
Um,
hence the point about once you've maybe refined the format,
mhm.
then it's a little bit more plug and play. Is that why you're
Yeah,
thinking? Yeah,
yeah, I
that
think that
makes
could be
sense.
cool. So, but anyways, yeah, it's interesting. And then the other thing that I wanted to add, and it kind of goes along with the thing that I was just saying, we when we went to Miami, there were some folks that were actually making a documentary, and
Mm,
they said, they wanted to interview us to put, I guess it was a docu series. So they had done several docu series before, and this was the next one they were going to do on decentralized finance and NFTs. And so they said, hey, come on in, at 11 a.m., come into this room, and we'll do a little interview with you for half hour, 45 minutes. And it's kind of similar to what we were doing. We would have a room, bring people in, do an interview. But they had, a full camera crew, multiple cameras, boom mics, lav mics, a director
mm,
basically,
yeah.
um, and so that made me think, well, I've done live productions
Mm,
for streaming, at least for my other project, the Piano Technicians Master Classes. So I know, you know, kind of the budget of stuff like that. And
yeah.
so potentially, we could. I'm even thinking we're going to be back in Miami in early December,
Oh, really?
and it might
For
make
another
sense
conference?
to just hire local. You can hire local AV crews,
Sure.
and they bring their
Absolutely.
own equipment,
Absolutely.
and you just say, just start filming when I say so, and
Yeah.
when all is said and done, just give us the footage and the recording. So
In
yeah.
fact, what popped into my head is that, there's so many people who maybe isn't the highest priced or the most experienced, but there's a lot of, I'm not going to say you're going to go to just out of college, but there's just a lot of people in that space that you can get that help and not have to pay a fortune for, I got to think.
hmm yeah, and even like it seems like a little bit higher, but in the end, it's not so bad. Like if you for a day of filming from a professional crew, you know, a couple $1,000. I
Right.
think I asked the guys who were doing the documentary, like, well,
Hmm.
what range would you say? And he was like, yeah, I don't know, no more than like $4,000. I mean, that might
Okay.
seem like a lot, but like
Yeah. Well, it depends
to
on the value
capture
of this
this
content and what you can
pro
do with it.
content, yeah. And that's another thing which is also relevant to kind of our discussions as podcasters, which I think it's not always obvious. And I think we've been highlighting it a little bit more is that we are not just podcasters, we're little production studios,
Hmm.
right? And
Interesting.
you can, that's the selling point. So when people come on the pod, so we do two things. We're soliciting advertisers, right? That might just do a little spot like a
Yeah.
traditional podcast advertisement. But then we're also doing featured episodes, right? So where somebody is our guest for the show, they go through the whole format. It's way more personal. People prefer it because we get to know them. And
Right.
I mean, we had a sponsored episode that just came out, and somebody messaged me like, "That was an awesome episode. I loved it." It's like it's not it's very low intensity in terms of are we selling you something,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it just happens that we were compensated, and we always say this is a spotlight episode, it's been sponsored.
That's what you're calling them,
So
spotlight episodes.
yeah, and so one of the selling points of the spotlight episode is we have professionally produced content,
Hmm.
and so think about it, if you were to hire someone to put together professional audio, video, interviews, and clips and all this stuff, I mean, it's going to cost you a couple
Oh, yeah.
$1,000 anyways. So
Right. Right.
come on the show, and then when we're done, we'll give you the raw material, and you say, hey,
Right.
clip
So
it
it's
here.
not unlike I mean, this has been done for, like, if I wanted to create a cheesy little commercial video, or if I wanted to do my, I might spend that kind of money on an animation video. So, but this is content that's even more valuable to promote yourself and whatever it is that you're offering, right? And so you're
hmm
getting that out of it as well, is
Yeah.
what you're saying. Yep.
Yeah. And so that's cool, and it feels good because it also like highlights that's another thing that we ran across. It's like you probably get this. Everybody gets this who's in podcasts, and you'll get the people who say, "You should have me on your show," and you're
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, we should, I guess." Like we're kind of booked out for a little bit,
Right. Right.
and like people almost depending on the person, and you can tell how little they understand goes into podcasting, make
Yeah.
it sound like they're doing you a favor,
Right. Right. Right.
or that it's free for you or
Yeah.
whatever. And one another thing we would say is, yeah, we can have you on the show, but we're backlogged. If you want to pay a little bit to help subsidize the production costs, then sure, let's do it.
Mm.
And then it's funny, right? Because then people are like, "Oh, no, thanks." And you're like, "Okay,
Yeah.
fine." It does cost me time, energy, and money to produce this. So if you don't want to contribute and you think it's just like, this special
This hobby
thing
thing that
where,
we do, we're just,
yeah, exactly. So
what I get
that's
a
an
lot is,
interesting angle.
would you be interested in having our CEO come and talk about blah, blah, blah? That's like, so you just want to do a commercial, right?
Yeah, exactly. So many people they think,
And I just
and
blatantly
then
tell people, listen, I don't do commercials in my shows. So unless there's something of value that we can share with my audience and then offer something, that's okay. But,
yeah.
and more, I tell you, I'm any opportunity, any situation where I think I might be able to turn it into an affiliate opportunity, then that's where I'm going with it as well. So that's
Hmm.
kind of, I mean, I've been talking about that and shared that with you guys for quite some time, but I'm really becoming a lot more aggressive about that approach.
Hmm. Yeah, that's
Not
cool.
not unlike how you're approaching the what did you call it again when somebody's paying for it?
Like a spotlight episode or.
Spotlight episode. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm doing one tomorrow. The guy had reached out to me. And it had particular appeal to me because a similar thing has worked for me before. But he has a handyman business, and he has a course that's been successful for him where he teaches people how to start a handyman business. Well, that's the right fit demographically for a lot of my audience. As I mentioned before, the guy who does teach you how to do a pallet, the wooden pallet brokerage
Right.
business, that's been my most successful affiliate. I mean, I've made almost $15,000 in the last year on just that affiliate alone.
That's amazing.
So this one is perfect. So he wanted to just come on, and I essentially didn't say no, but I stalled it until we worked out an affiliate agreement where we'll promote his course and I get a commission on that.
Hmm. That's fascinating.
And so I'm doing more and more of that. So that's my version of a spotlight episode. Now we're still going to cover it as if that part wasn't there. He's going to share his entrepreneurial journey, tips and advice for someone who is thinking about it. So we're still going to share it just like I would on a regular episode, but then we'll promote the special offer on his online course, and I get a commission on that.
Right, right. And do you also do inserted ads for that?
I'll do, depending on the relationship, I am starting to do then my own host read promos for that affiliate that I'll insert into other episodes. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've essentially come to a complete halt on traditional sponsorships. Like LinkedIn. I could have had LinkedIn all year, but this makes more sense than a one-time. My fee right now for a mid-roll is $150. Well, that's it's peanuts compared to this one affiliate that I'm talking about that I made 15,000 on, right? So,
right.
And it's something that continues producing, right? This traditional sponsor pays once and that's it, regardless of whether that episode gets 100 or 10,000 downloads. It's not tied to number of downloads. It's a flat fee, at least the way that I've been able to sell sponsorships, right? And that's pretty much how those companies buy sponsorships on shows like mine.
Right, right.
So anyway.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I'm sure some people are exploring the model of, we run your ads for 3 months, but if you want to keep running them, keep them in the episodes, you just pay like
that's a good idea. And I might follow up on that. Because I think this has come up before where in just about every sponsorship that I've done, I specifically in the agreement have a 90-day minimum. So I have the right to remove that sponsorship after 90 days.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now,
That's
I
a good
haven't done that a lot,
round
but I will start doing that, especially as I re-release my back catalog. Then, of course, that sponsorship content gets dropped if it's no longer to my advantage, which usually it's
number.
not. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's chat a little bit about your episode with Mark. I got to listen to the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Oh, you did? What did
What
you think?
Yeah, it was actually just pretty cool. It was fun to hear a little bit about Mark, more about Mark's background, and the stuff he's been working on before, um, before we met him and podcasting and stuff. And it sounds like you're doing an affiliate thing with that, so
I
that's
am, yeah.
interesting.
Although I don't, it'll be interesting to see where it goes because it'll be interesting to see. So here's where that started. Well, first of all, I mean, I've wanted to have Mark on the show for some time, but where this conversation got started is I had looked at my search stats for Google Podcasts, I think it is, an incredible number of searches to my show for some form of the keyword phrase, how starting a business podcast,
Hmm.
of which I have zero content on until today on my
Interesting,
website
right?
to that. But it makes sense because my podcast is called the How of Business
Business,
Podcast. Yeah.
right?
So I'm thinking, well, shit, I'm wasting this organic traffic that's coming my way and finding nothing.
Right.
What am I doing here? And then I had come to understand that Mark has a workshop, although I didn't know that it's a live workshop. And so I've encouraged them to think about starting to create a video
Recording
version
it.
of that. Yeah. Recording it.
Mhm.
Exactly. That's what I told him. I think he's going to do that for the next one. Just start like you do. Just start recording it and maybe you'll use some of it. Maybe you won't, but at least you have
Right.
something, right? So hopefully it'll turn into that. But I thought, well, shoot, why not partner with Mark to at least have something to offer for this traffic that's coming to my website now and dead ending? So now I have a landing page just on general information on starting your own podcasts. And now I have this episode. I've done a couple other episodes in the past on podcasting, like when I interviewed Rob Greenlee. It's probably been a couple years ago. So I've got a
Hmm.
little bit of collection of content there, but I had never packaged it on a landing page. And so in conjunction with interviewing Mark and seeing if we can get anybody to fork up the money. That's the thing, man. People don't want to pay, right? So, and the price point, what was the price point? It's not cheap. 400
A
and
few
something.
$100, right?
Yeah, which is not bad, you would think, but that's always been the challenge with my audience is finding what price point are people willing to invest. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I don't know, like the palette course that I'm referring to, that's a $2,000 course. It's not trivial.
Hmm.
And yet I had a heck of a time getting anybody to sign up for a $20 workshop that I did on reading your P&L statement, right? So it's hard to figure that out. It's an ongoing process. So
Yeah.
we'll see. But the thing is, what I want him to do and encourage him to do is to
Did you
create
try
some
making?
repeatable
Did you
content.
try making your reading your P&L course a $2,000 course?
But then there's a lot to that. So absolutely, we could have a conversation about that because there's a lot of validity to what it is. Was my first that would have last year. I would have been a free workshop.
Hmm.
And so this was my first attempt, just to go off on this tangent for a moment, at putting a price to it because what I was getting is a lot of registrations and very few numbers showing up. No skin in the game.
Right.
All of the people who paid showed up, even for that nominal $20.
Sure. Yeah.
So it did prove my point on that there's a lot of factors going on. First of all, I don't call them webinars anymore. I call them workshops. People have gotten so burned out on webinars during COVID
Hmm.
and they register for shit. And then it's not that important. It falls off the calendar easily. I mean, I'm guilty of that as well. Right.
Hmm.
But when I pay for something, even if it is $20, I don't want to lose my $20. And that did work. So it was a good test. But you're right that there's an association of price to value. Right. And so that's where pricing comes in. But coming back to Mark, so that's how we came to that. Afterwards, I thought, God, maybe I spent too much time on the entrepreneurial journey and didn't get to the content fast enough.
Sure.
But, it is what it is.
I do agree. I mean, not that I agree, but I did. There was a part way through the episode, I was like, I thought they were going to talk about
This
podcasting.
exactly. So what I try to do what I do in those episodes is, you might notice in the description, but again, who looks at that it tells you in parentheses the time at which we start talking about podcasting, which is like 19 minutes in.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Maybe I should have edited that into 2 episodes, or maybe we should have done 2 episodes. I know that my audience likes the entrepreneurial journey part.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why that's still part of my format.
Yeah, it was interesting to listen to. It was
just
asking,
it's just is somebody listening.
Podcasting?
And the other thing it does for me, and so I've struggled with this question even beyond just this episode as I've evolved my show format. But what it does is somebody will get something out of it, even if they have no interest in podcasting, just by hopefully listening to his journey. Right. So that's the other way I think, because I have this challenge of having
interested, you get some real estate stuff. What's
exactly.
About?
Something you didn't know about him. Yeah. And also the thing that's a theme that I think people respond to is, so I could have gone to school and studied history, but yet this person has pivoted in their life and become a business owner. They didn't go to business school. They don't have an MBA. That is a misconception often with people looking to start their first business. Well, maybe I don't know how to do that, or I don't have the education. I don't have a business degree. Well, as it turns out, most successful business owners don't either.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's an important message to continue communicating to people.
Yeah. The other moment was where he was like, it was I don't forget how long he said, maybe a year or 2 or whatever. And he said, and then I had replaced my income from my job. For some people that sounds like, oh man, it took me 20 years to replace my income for my corporate job or whatever.
Or still trying to. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you go, oh man, all right, that's cool. That's possible, right?
That's possible. Exactly. It paints a picture of what's possible.
Right.
And so that anyway, what I do on a yearly basis, and now it's coming up on that, is what tweak do I want to make to my format based on what I want to do and the input that I get from my audience. And so I'm starting to think about that.
Oh yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually that's a good topic too. You mean you do like an annual review? I
use that opportunity to say, okay, what do I want to change? Or it might even be like this year I brought in one new question that I've been asking mostly, or either it comes up, which is what does being a boss do for you? What is the benefit of you being a boss? Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to because what I've been doing as I re-release shows or I release topic episodes, I'll take snippets from previous episodes on that particular subject or question. Mm-hmm. And what I've got is a better system now. My checklist that I use after a show, I'm starting to capture. Because the work with that is if I going back to my catalog of 300 episodes, I know that when I talked to Ethan, he mentioned what he thought it took, blah, blah, blah. But to go find that now is like needle in a haystack. So as I'm covering those, when I produce or finish the show, I'm capturing those snippets. Oh, Mark said something interesting about blah, blah, blah that I might use later as a snippet in another episode. Right.
That's a good. Actually, this is interesting, and maybe I can show you guys this in a little bit more detail, but I'll show you our workflow for when we do podcast recording. This evolved out of meeting with Cortland Allen of the Indie Hackers podcast.
Yeah.
Because he used Notion, which is
Notion?
It's like an online, it's like really versatile, and so it's more than like a note-taking application.
Kind of like an offshoot of Evernote or something similar to that.
Yeah, exactly. Evernote. Yeah, kind of. I'm going to show it to you, right? And so you can kind of see it's got interesting sort of database properties that you can't always get with a note-taking application.
I see. Interesting.
But yeah, I think, and maybe now that I think of it, I should probably just show the group this maybe a little bit more sometime, but I'll give you an overview. So this is like our Edge of NFT episode prep docs. And Chris and I did this with Run With It as well. So, it went from Cortland. We did it with Cortland for one of his episodes. Then we started to create our own thing. And then when I was advising the guys on starting the NFT podcast, I was like, hey, let's start with this.
Well, especially because there's multiple hosts. And so that really becomes important, the coordination and the collaboration.
Yeah, totally. And so we have a format. Let's see, maybe one that has a format here. Start out with Rarible. Yeah, here is like a regular episode. And so this is a list of them, but then in Notion, you can actually open each individual document and it'll either pop it up or you can have it, full screen if you want.
Is this a free
And
version of this app
yeah,
or?
don't pay anything for this actually. It's quite valuable. And so one of the cool features of it, I don't always we don't always use it, but it can, have little identifying data up top here. You can create little what would you call it? Drop down menus or something. So this is closed right
Yeah,
now, but if I want
checkboxes.
to take a look at it, now we got a recording checklist and we don't actually check them off all the time, but you can. Oh, hey, I
Yeah,
did
but it's there.
that.
Yeah,
And now
absolutely.
I did that. And now we're done with this and we're done with this. So that's useful. And
Hmm.
then, if you're done with it, you don't have to look at it. We also can share this with our guest really easily if they want to take a look at the questions. Um, I put, I realized we have like a format for our headlines. So I put an example one, and I actually have someone from my team who prepares the documents, and I say, hey, like, do your best at a title, and I'll go back and fix it. And when I do the final version, I usually edit it in this document. I also edit the description in here. But any info, like you're saying, right? Why not at least get a little bit of that done right on the
Right.
spot so you don't
Absolutely.
forget?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, then we have, green room stuff. This is the typical episode format: introduction, guest
Hmm.
bios. Then we have segment one. This is where we have our research assistant like prepare some questions, but then Jeff from our team goes back and actually modifies them. Again, it's really cool because you can put a little drop down menu. So, hey, we
Oh,
have a question,
so
but like
follow up
here's
stuff,
some details in case you wanted to
supporting. Yeah.
follow up. And then we always do this segment. It's the same questions, but
Hitters.
we keep it in here for the guests to look at and for us to
Right.
review. Aside from checking things off, an easy thing that we do sometimes is we just highlight it and just hit the strike through. Okay, we're done with that one. And this is also really useful for us to manage three people asking questions. So we
Yes.
write
Yes.
each other's names in here. If we're all looking at it, and if it's, I could just write in here, hey, is this a good question? And then somebody could say, "Oh yeah," and they could write something, and then we could communicate in such a way where we skip the question or we assign it to somebody else or something. So that's kind of fun, and
So
that's
the
the
quick
quick.
hitters is an example of where you now have you will have a catalog of some
Hmm.
every people answering that same question
Exactly, that is true.
that then
Yeah,
you could go back and pull snippets
yeah,
of or do a compilation show, and you could tell you could delegate that easily, right, to
yeah,
to somebody to create those extractions.
yeah.
You don't
Potentially,
have
yeah.
to
That's
go. Yeah.
that's always
And
been something we had in
right.
mind. Yeah.
And so one thing I would recommend, Ethan, is think about, and I mean, some of those 10 questions probably are, but that's similar to what I'm saying. What I'm doing at the end of the year is I would go to those 10 questions and say, okay, could I add one or change one that
Hmm.
might be more evergreen that I would be interested in compiling a year from now? You follow what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Give
Yeah,
that some thought. Yeah.
yeah. That's cool.
Maybe
I'll
it's,
show you
I'm
the.
predicting the future of NFT or something that might be interesting to look back on a year or two later. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. That's a great idea. These are our hot topics. So these is like the news of the day. Again, we have a headline and
And
then
this is after
details.
your guest, you've done with your guest, or the guest is still on the show when you're doing the hot topics?
Typically, the guests
Depends.
will stay on for the
Okay.
hot topics,
Because they
but
might
it
have a
is,
comment or they might have input on it. Yeah.
yeah, and we actually try to choose hot topics that are related to what they do.
Relative. Okay.
So like this guy worked in like collectible, sports cards. And so, oh hey, this one's about a soccer team that has its NFT collection coming out, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't do it at first, but we realized, hey, why don't we curate them so they're hot topics that this
Sure.
person might have a unique opinion on.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And this is interesting too because I've realized they're just news articles that we found online,
Right.
and all we have to do, I literally just read the headline. Hey,
Yeah. And
this is
then
an
talk about
article
it. And it
from.
prompts questions and it prompts ideas and it prompts conversation. Right.
Exactly.
But
But
really,
and
that's
then
how you're
I'll
using it as a prompt.
yeah. And then even I'll read a little bit from the article directly. Oh, it's, according to so and so, and when you listen to the episode, it just sounds like, you know, part of the conversation, right? It doesn't sound scripted, really. It just sounds interesting. And then, yeah, we have a chat. So that's kind of a cool way to both bring in like newsworthy information,
Right.
and a little bit of extra content. Then we have our closing. But anyways, the reason I thought about this, we got some wrap up things. I can go through this a little bit more with people because I
Hmm.
think it could be cool.
Yeah.
But now I'm thinking a little bit of like tags, like just put some check boxes towards the end and say, okay, everybody, let's go through this. Did this cover,
Mm.
metaverse? Did this cover real estate? Did this
Right,
cover,
Dad. I love that.
and
I love that idea.
tag the episode
To
itself with
catalog, to
these
start
things?
cataloging this content. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's easy to go back and start doing interesting stuff
I
with
like
it.
that
So
idea.
yeah.
Because that's a little easier for me to do because over the last 2 to 3 years, my episodes are very specific on a topic, but you guys are broad ranging. And so it'd be great for you to be able to go back, and I could still apply it to me as well. I love the idea to easily go back to which episodes did we talk about this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you could curate content from those episodes if you wanted to, or prescribe them to somebody, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
share them to a particular audience. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great idea.
Cool stuff.
All right, man.
All right. Well, we
Oh,
hit
yeah.
the hour
Somehow,
here.
again, we managed to talk for an hour.
Managed to waste another hour of our time.
Another precious hour of time.
All
So,
right.
yeah.
Well,
So I know one question I have before it leaves my mind. It looks like you guys are still doing transcripts of every episode, and you put that on the show notes page. Is that correct?
so Podetize, our producer, has its own system of transcripts. So
I
we
see.
never get like an exact transcript of the show.
Okay.
They actually produce what they
Oh,
claim
yeah,
is
yeah,
like an
yeah.
SEO
Right. So that's
blogified
huge.
transcript of the
I
show.
remember him explaining it when he was on the
Yeah.
podcast Mastermind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That's good. That's good stuff. That's got to be
But
starting to
that's nice
produce.
because we don't have to put, I don't do anything for that
I
except say,
know. No,
okay,
that's
good, let's
huge.
publish it.
That's
Yeah.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well,
pretty
good.
cool.
All right.
Hey, man.
I should be on next week. Are we doing a session next week, being Thanksgiving week? I am available, but I didn't know
We
if
can.
what you
Yeah,
were
as long
doing.
as everybody's cool with it. It's Monday, right? It's not Thursday or anything. So,
That's right. So, okay. Well, I'll assume it's a go unless I hear otherwise.
okay, that sounds great. I think we can handle it.
Sounds good.
All right, cool,
All
man.
right, man.
Catch you
Talk
later.